We're very excited today to have with us a special guest, Julie Rochman, who is a longtime insurance industry executive, most recently serving as president and CEO of the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. You may be familiar with IBHS from their work with the $40 million disaster testing center in South Carolina. Julie led the project to get that built and has now moved into retirement, but we're super excited that she's been agreed to be part of our board of directors for the past 4 years. Julie and I have worked together for more than 20 years, and I have such great respect for her and her work and her communication abilities. So she's joining us today to talk about the topic, insurance education. Welcome, Julie. So glad to have you with us.
Thanks very much, Carl. Yeah, we started when we were both about, 13 or 14 years old in the industry, right?
Yeah.
And I am thrilled and honored to be a part of WSRB's ecosystem and to sit on your board. WSRB delivers superior customer service, always focused on adding value for subscribers. And just does such great work. The people are wonderful humans. The focus on service, the focus on adding value is impressive every single day. So thanks for having me on today as well.
Absolutely. So let's kick it off with this question for you. Why is insurance education so important for our industry to think about and invest in?
There's so many, many good reasons why educating our various audiences about insurance concepts, principles, practices, operations are important. But let me just tick off 4 of them real quick. One is reducing conflict or friction with policyholders. A lack of understanding or lack of mutual understanding, even more importantly, often will lead to problems and complaints. Second is just managing their expectations about what happens through the entire life cycle of a policy. Third would be improving carriers' customer experience, which I know everybody rates. And so you want to have good ratings on customer experience. And then finally, along those same lines, that we can avoid a lot of complaints to state regulators. If our contracts are understood, even though they're dense and often not read at all, we're better off because policyholders are less likely to complain to regulators either before or after they have a claim.
Absolutely. Thank you, Julie. That's some good stuff for us to be thinking about and taking some action on. One of the things that you and I have talked about in the past is that based on our experience with the public, there's maybe a misunderstanding of what it means to spread risk among people with like risk characteristics. I've sometimes felt that the public looks at insurance companies as having these vaults of cash in the basement with armies of undead attorneys looking to deny claims somehow. And that is how it works. Can you talk a little bit about the concept of risk and spreading risk and the pooling of risk and not so much that our audience needs to hear that because we all get it, but how can we explain that to the public in a way that they'll understand?
Well, that's a really big question. And I think you're right. People seem to think there's like a shoebox in a vault someplace with their name on it, and all the premiums they've paid over many years just go into that box for use if and when they file a claim. And that's just not, we all know that's not the truth of the matter. And that the better way to think about this is that every single day of every single year, there are people, something happens to them, a disaster, something that happens to you personally, right? And you'll have a loss or someone will be injured or killed and you need to file claims. And I think the better way for us to explain to people is if you don't have a claim during your policy term, you didn't lose anything. You paid for potential protection, and you're fortunate if you didn't have to call on that policy to provide that compensation and protection. If you didn't have to access your policy during the year, that's a win. It's not a loss. And people kind of think of it, generally speaking, as the opposite. Because if and when you do have a loss, other similarly situated, as you mentioned, other similarly situated people or businesses in your risk pool are now the fortunate ones, you're the unfortunate one, and they're going to help cover the costs of your damage because that's what the companies do. We manage the premiums we collect, our investments and our reserves very well. It's what we exist to do. And I think we should be more proactive about explaining to people that it's different. You buy a toaster, you get a toaster. That's great. You buy an insurance policy, you're buying potential protection and financial compensation. If you don't need those things, that's a good thing. All you really paid out was the premium. If you see a neighbor or someone who has a loss, you should feel bad for them, but also feel good that if they're insured, they will, in some, really meaningful ways, be made whole.
Excellent. Absolutely. And I just I think this is such an important thing for us to be able to explain to our insurance consumers, whether they're commercial or residential, whether they're auto policy holders, these concepts that we're not, it's not a savings account. You're not saving it up. You talked about the shoebox. I love that analogy. This isn't a fund where you are entitled to everything you put in. You're sharing. The sharing economy a few years ago was a big deal until everyone realized it's really not sharing, it's renting, right? But the concept of sharing the economy went well because people like the idea of sharing and being generous. Well, that's what we're doing here. We're a group of people with similar risk characteristics who are sharing each other's costs. When there's a loss, we're sharing that cost amongst each other, governed by the terms of the insurance contract that says this is covered, this isn't covered. And so one of the ways I've seen people get crossways is that they don't read their policy and they don't understand that it's a homeowner's policy, for example, not a home policy. Not everything in the home is covered, but what is covered is specifically outlined and what's excluded is outlined. And you need to have that firm understanding of it. They think, well, it's a homeowner's policy, everything should be covered. So that's an area I think we can do a really good job of helping our policyholders understand how that part works as well.
Absolutely agree. I mean, I think people rarely read their policies, whether they're residential or commercial policyholders. I've always emphasized, as I know you have throughout our careers as communicators, that people do need to read those policies. And if they have questions, they need to ask the questions. That's what your agent is there for, or your customer service rep is there for, is to explain anything that you don't understand. It is not a, you don't buy a phone or a television or whatever without looking, doing some real research around what it is you're about to purchase. And people need to do that too. We need to put some of this responsibility back on the customer to say, you have a responsibility to pay attention to what it is you are buying. Because when there's a claim, most people maybe have a claim, maybe two in their entire lifetime, maybe an auto claim and a homeowner's claim or a commercial business claim. And it's going to be traumatic. And this may be the worst thing that's ever happened to them in their lives. So we really have to do the education before that happens, because when people are traumatized or stressed or trying to deal with severe loss, their ears aren't as open to what we're trying to say as they would have been in a calm sort of peacetime situation.
Absolutely. I so agree with that. And one of the things that I think people don't understand, and you touched on it a little bit, but the role of insurance in a society, specifically in here in the United States, we're looking at the entrepreneurial aspect as well. Can you talk about that a little bit, about how perhaps we could explain to the public the value to society, not just to you personally for your personal finances, but to the society in general?
That's a really good point, because people tend to think of insurance as a very personal thing. I have it on my car, my house, my possessions, my business. But writ large, you really can't take any kind of risk without laying off or sharing or securitizing some of that risk. And we are at heart an entrepreneurial economy. The definition of an entrepreneurial economy is that people are going to take risks to start businesses and to invest. It's why the FDIC insures bank deposits. Insurance is a broad term for basically being the oxygen of commerce and the oxygen of entrepreneurism. If we can't spread and share risk, we can't bear the risk. You think about office buildings, ships. I mean, even going back to Lloyd's of London, then sort of the original insurance exchange, we have a long, wonderful, productive history of allowing construction projects to go forward, professional football teams to hold games in stadiums full of 100,000 people, cruise ships to be on the ocean. There's so many things that insurance really sort of greases the skids for. It is impressive. My house, we always say all roads lead back to insurance. Whatever it is you want to do in life or in business, at some point you're going to run into the insurance industry, and that's a good thing, because we're here to help and to secure people's dreams and hopes and possessions.
That's excellent. I love how you said that all roads lead to insurance. I think that's so true when it comes to the economy and it comes to what we're doing. I was at a New Year's party at one point, and of course, because we're colleagues, a lot of us were insurance folks. We said to the other people, "Hey, you might as well join the insurance industry because all roads lead to insurance." A little different than the more important concept you're outlining, but it was. They go, "Oh, I don't know if I want to." Hey, everybody winds up working in insurance at some point. Was our joke. So I'm so glad that we have this opportunity to talk with leaders in our industry about this idea that we can do more to help our customers understand what we do, how we do it, what the value is, so that they can be supportive of us. Because it's I've heard people say it's not, well, no, everybody hates insurance, they always will. It's not worth investing in. And I know you and I really disagree on that concept. What are some of the potential downsides of us not doing this work?
I mean, if we don't explain to people what our industry is,
Yes.
I think the real downside is that people who don't have a good understanding and don't securitize their life, their property, their businesses the way they should will have losses and suffer from stress and injuries. All sorts of bad things will come to them when they would have had somebody with them to help them manage those things, to help them through, to help put them back, to make them as whole as possible. Because life is nothing really more than a series of choices and balancing those choices. And risk is attached to every choice you make, large and small. Like, do you go skydiving? Do you rock climb? Do you marry someone you've just met? Do you drive super fast? I mean, everything, every question you ask yourself, every decision you make, at the heart of those questions often is about taking or not taking, in other words, managing risk. And your choices about what you do and how you balance risk has consequences. Same is true on the financial side. And that's really what we do. So if we don't explain to people the insurance mechanism and how it can benefit and protect them, they will make bad choices. And as a result, they will suffer. And I think it is the wonderful thing about our industry is we are designed to help people through the worst times of their life or their careers. And it would be their loss, and it would be our loss, obviously not to have the business, not to be there to help people. But, it's just so fundamentally important to the way we live our lives. I just can't conceive of not having a basic working knowledge of how the insurance industry works.
Absolutely. And you touched on that early on, the idea that we want to reduce conflict with insurance. We want to manage policyholder expectations. We want to have a better customer experience. And I think those things are all super important. And I know from my many years working for an insurance company, that was a focus for us. But I think if we take it even beyond that, again, looking at this idea that people hate insurance and always will, I don't believe that's true. I believe we can help them understand, as we're talking about today, and that what that also will do, if we don't do it for the reasons we've already outlined, I think we should do it because it will also put our policyholders in a position to side with us when there are inevitable conflicts that happen. I mean, in every state, you've seen a situation where the media might get it wrong, and this is getting broadcast out there, or government officials or public policy might be proposed that would be adverse to the customer. Right at this point, we don't have as much public support as I think we could have if people truly understood the concepts we're talking about today. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I sort of touched on this earlier. I think for people to understand the four corners of the policies is critical, and I don't just mean policy holders. We have so many audiences that we need to educate. You mentioned policy makers. There's the general public, there's state regulators, there's media, there's government officials at all levels. And business sectors that are insurance industry adjacent, like the roofing industry and the repair shops. I mean, there's so many people who need to have some sort of understanding of insurance. And then we have to remember that there's going to be turnover in all those audiences. There's going to be new elected or appointed officials on a regular basis. People are going to age into driving. They're going to buy a house for the first time. They're going to start a business. So there's really a consistent need for us to be out there educating people. Because again, where there's a lack of understanding, there will be friction. And that friction can lead to horrific public policy, bad reputational risk through the media or other advocacy groups. So we have to be out there just constantly pushing information that's understandable to those various audiences and that touches on the things that they care most about.
And we're really looking at a long-term investment is what we're talking about. I think that's what you and I are encouraging the industry to look at. How do we take some of our dollars that we might be spending in advertising and invest them in education? Because if we can have a group of insurance agents or policyholders or public policymakers, all the groups that we named, when they understand better what insurance is all about, they get it. You've had those discussions. I've had those discussions. Some of us on this who are watching this with us have had those conversations at Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner or birthday parties. And when they get it and the light comes on, it is so gratifying to, oh, okay, I understand what you're saying. So insurance isn't like a necessary evil. It's actually a benefit to me. That's what I think we really can move our constituents, the stakeholders, if you will, to a position where they are able to support the work that we do. Is everything perfect? No. Sometimes a claim goes the wrong way, and the company reviews it, and they may reverse where they decided to fall on that. Insurance isn't perfect because there's people involved, but the mechanism is such a benefit to the policyholders, to the society that we live in. And I just get fired up about the idea that we could really bring people along with us to see it, not just the way we do, but to see it accurately, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're 100% right. We have to invest. We have to sustain the information sharing, the illustration, and the other thing is, I think we really should embrace the way younger people communicate. Right? You want to meet people where they are, and younger people are very used to infographics and brief videos and things like that. And I know insurance is a complicated thing overall, but certainly things can be broken down and simplified in ways that we can get concepts across. And if we can get concepts across and build on those blocks, then the more sophisticated things fall into place.
I love that. Like we've talked about today, Julie, the concept of insurance is fairly simple. The delivery of it is certainly complex. The contracts, the claims process, but the concept of groups of people with similar risk characteristics pooling their resources to help each other when they have a loss, that the goal of an insurance company is to pay every legitimate claim, and that when you pay claims that aren't covered under the contract, you're actually taking the policyholder's money incorrectly, right? Those types of concepts, I think, are pretty straightforward. What do you think in terms of one of the things I think can be daunting for a company is, well, I don't know how I'd even start something like this. How could I possibly get involved in insurance education when I don't know really even where to start? I think there's some resources out there that people could look at. And I've got a few in mind, but you go first if you would, please.
There are, and companies do, I think, a good job. Right? We should, full stop, say it isn't like the insurance industry has never delved into education, either individually as carriers or collectively. They do. They do. And they have invested in some wonderful organizations. We just need to constantly, I think, update the way we communicate and what it is we're talking about. But fortunately, there are so many, look, WSRB does a wonderful job. The blog that you guys have on topics large and small is definitely worth reading, for sure. I mean, there's all sorts of great stuff about residential and commercial property issues. For general information, of course, you're gonna go with the Insurance Information Institute, and so am I. The Insurance Institute for Highway Safety in the areas of, of commercial and personal vehicles and engineering and roadways. The Insurance Institute for Building and Home Safety, which I used to lead. The Insurance Institutes of America, the National Association of Mutual Insurance Companies, the American Property Casualty Insurance Association. And in most states, there are state-based trade associations, which you know even better than I do, and news services that serve as basically frontline translators for the industry, both in terms of times of crisis and on an everyday basis. But go for it. There are other people I'm sure I'm missing.
That was a fantastic list, Julie. And I agree. Certainly, the companies are doing a lot of education. I think where I was kind of leading is exactly toward that list that you mentioned, including the Griffith Foundation for Insurance Education, some of those organizations. These are organizations that our audience is already investing in. So I guess that's what I was thinking is take advantage of the organizations you're investing in and get them the opportunity to help, maybe even directly take some of that information and convey it to your customer base, along with links and other resources on an ongoing cadence. I think that just really, it'll make such a difference in the way that people look at our industry when they continually get this ongoing, accurate perspective of what we're all about. Julie, any final comments here before we wrap up?
I was just thinking when you were talking, Carl, as I often do when you're talking, because you say smart things that make me think. I was thinking that, we communicate with policyholders either electronically or via snail mail on a regular basis about premiums and other things. If carriers would take that opportunity to also include a little bit of, just a nugget of information, those things could add up. So in any, like in any not-for-profit organization, they keep asking you for money when they contact you. And people get annoyed because every time they contact you, they ask you for money. I'm sort of saying the reverse. We need to do more, not the asking for money, but the more educating. And whenever you have an opportunity on the phone, by mail, email, Zoom call, whatever it is, take the opportunity while that channel is open and their mind is open because they're focused on you for that minute to stick a little nugget of education in that channel or in that pipeline. And hopefully it'll be delivered and people will be receptive to it.
I love that. A lot of raindrops will form a river, and that's really what we're looking for. One question we've got here is, what can ordinary folks do to understand insurance better? That's the first question, Julie, that we're seeing here in the chat.
Well, that's a good one. So, first of all, for ordinary, everyday Americans and not people in the industry, I think asking friends and neighbors about companies with whom they've had good and bad experiences is a great way to start. I think just searching online about companies and reviews, which, keeps us all on our toes. But also, there are a lot of consumer-facing pieces of information out there. Like if you just Google what is an insurance policy, you'll find a lot of sources, some of which obviously are better than others. But I think for just a regular person, I would tend to start with the simple stuff and have them just ask questions. What is an insurance policy? What is an insurance premium? What is a deductible? Because if they don't have the ability to speak to us in our language, it becomes more complicated. By the same token, I think we also need to make sure that our customer service reps and agents are able to answer those questions in plain English or plain Spanish or plain whatever language your policyholders need the assistance in.
So follow up to that, we've got a question. If you were to summarize in just a few sentences, do you have kind of a go-to way to explain insurance? So if somebody says to you at Thanksgiving or at Christmas or Hanukkah or New Year's Eve or whatever, they say something to you that, insurance is horrible. What's your kind of go-to way to explain that in a few sentences to kind of equip our listeners to maybe have some tools in their toolkit?
So first of all, I always qualify that when I'm talking about insurance, I don't mean life insurance and I don't mean health insurance. I just mean property casualty because they're very different animals and they work very differently. So if you're just talking about homeowners, auto, business, liability, typical property casualty, I tend to say that kind of like what we said earlier, nothing exists without risk. None of us can bear 100% of a risk if there's a terrible loss. And the example I usually use is your house. If your house burned down and you didn't have insurance and you were 100% on the hook for rebuilding and replacing what you've lost, it would be unbearable. And people make the choice. There are people out there who go bare. That's fine. But for me, the easiest explanation is that property casualty insurance is a way to share the risk that we all bear by making decisions in society that put us in a position where there could be a loss. And that loss could bankrupt us.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you, Julie. That's a great explanation. And also, we've got a question that says, I'd like to drive loyalty based on more than just a lower cost. Are there programs that you've seen that work to help people grow the loyalty for their customer base beyond just, hey, we'll save you money, which is a common pitch on the TV ad that you see?
Sure. And service is also exceptionally important. And everybody on this webinar knows that. But cost is one thing. And there is always going to be a customer who says, I just don't care. I want to pay as little as possible. And you're probably not going to be able to change their mind. But service, additional things that your policy provides that they may not be aware of, that they may, if they go to the lower cost provider, may have to buy back, sewage backup, whatever the higher limit on this place or, this part of the policy or that part of the policy. But I think if you do a side-by-side on both cost and service, which to me includes what is included in the premium that I'm paying, I think that helps a lot because people may be surprised at all of the features that they're getting from policy. It's kind of like, when you're a boss, when you're a manager, it's nice to show your staff the total compensation package, not just their salary and any potential bonus, but all of the other benefits that you provide as an employer. And it turns out that the salary may be, 40 to 50% of their total comp package. I think it's the same sort of an explanation for insurers. We need to show all the wonderful things that are included that people may not be aware of. They may only think of fire or wind damage, or they may only think about liability with respect to their car. But we all know there are a lot of really great things that are included under that policy that you can promote.
Absolutely. And one thing that I've always liked too is the idea that we are providing peace of mind. If there's a loss, if something happens that was unexpected, you can have peace of mind that you're not out there by yourself. Your insurance company, your insurance policy covers you. A follow-up question from one of our attendees. What about using media as an education tool? And that's certainly something pretty near and dear to your heart and mind. What about media as an education tool?
Yeah, there's so many different types of media now. I mean, when I was coming up in the industry, there was broadcast television and broadcast terrestrial radio, and now there's satellite radio and there's streaming services, and there's still all the traditional types of media, but so many more things that are electronic. The challenge, I think, with electronic media is so much of it is just disposable. If you're not swiping through your feed at the right time, you'll miss something. So I think we really need to use all of the channels that are available to us to meet people where they are and where they get their information. If we don't, then we're just speaking to one small, segment, one small demographic segment, when we need to talk to a whole bunch of other people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Next question popping up here. The recent marine disaster in Baltimore could be an opportunity for the insurance industry to shine. I understand there are certain disasters that require governmental participation, nuclear, terrorism, some of those types of things, but this is not one, is it? And why would the federal government be needed in this situation when there should be coverage available through the policies that the city would have had, for example?
Well, first of all, there may be an issue with the limits on those policies. This is going to be a very, very expensive cleanup and rebuild. And it may be that the government is really attaching almost as a reinsurer or retrocessional layer, that by the time you exhaust all the coverage that the port has, the ship owner has, anybody else they can attach liability to, may simply not be enough. And I think the government is also stepping in on the theory that this is a national issue, because so much commerce moves through that port that there is a legitimate national interest. There's legitimate interest beyond just the people who are directly involved to get things going. And they can sort out who pays for what as they go. But this is, I think, probably going to largely outweigh any coverage that was in place.
Great question and a great answer, Julie. That brings us a little bit toward our next question here, which is more related to your many years as president and CEO of the the Institute for Business and Home Safety. Are disasters in general an opportunity for, as I think the previous question was going after, are disasters an opportunity for companies to step up and communicate more? They go into action. We all know, as in the industry, we go into action. We'll send adjusters across the country to various places to meet the needs of the claims, but are we doing as much as we could to communicate when those disasters happen as to what's covered or what isn't?
I am a firm believer that the insurance industry is at its very best after a disaster. I mean, after Hurricane Katrina, we closed 90% of claims in 90 days, and there were millions of claims. It doesn't mean there still won't be tens of thousands of claims that are open that will get a lot of media coverage, to go back to the media issue for just a second. And we have to counter those things. We have to be out there. Claims adjusters need to be explaining immediately to the policyholder why maybe 3 adjusters have been there. Maybe the first adjuster came out and saw that it was in fact a policy that was our company's policy, but the homeowner wasn't there and I didn't have access to the property. So I leave a card. And then the next day, another adjuster comes and sees there's a tree on the roof, but we have to have the tree removed before we can assess all the damage. So they leave a card. And maybe they even talk to the homeowner. And then the third adjuster comes back once the tree's been removed. And all the homeowner sees is, why were there 3 different people? Do I have to start over with you? They can get kind of annoyed. So it's really important that the third adjuster explains, well, the first guy was here, this happened. The second guy was here, this happened. And now I'm the third person. there is a tremendous opportunity for us to educate people and push back on, and we have to push back on the storm chasers, the trial lawyers, the roofers, other people who will come into town. And that's where flyers, claim centers, where there are tents and water and people, to whom customers can ask questions. We need to be very closely aligned with what the government agencies who are there, both federal, state, and even local, if they're there. We need to have, I would say, like handouts or reels that we can provide to people that they can just run with, because it is like a war zone. It's wartime versus peacetime. We have to be prepared to communicate during peacetime, and we have to be able to communicate during wartime. I think the carriers do a really terrific job. Unfortunately, the media tends to focus again on those claims that aren't resolved easily and quickly, and they will spotlight. And then, of course, people tend to sympathize with their neighbors and friends who are not being, having their claims settled maybe as expeditiously as they would have liked. So yeah, we've got to be out there. We also need to educate our agents. And it's key, I think, to remember that agents come from the community. They want to help their friends and neighbors. They might want to write checks themselves. Say to the carrier, give me a checkbook and I'll just take care of it, which is not going to happen. But we need to educate agents so that they know where to send their friends and relatives and customers, because they're going to be there long after the storm has passed and people have rebuilt. The claims people are going to move in and move out. So making sure that the agents, the regulators, the media who come in from outside, and anybody else that we can enlist as an ally is going to be critically important.
Excellent. Great answer. Thank you so much, Julie. I think we're at the end of our turn today. I so appreciate you bringing your knowledge, your experience, your communication skills to the table today for us to have this conversation that will hopefully help and equip our listeners to be able to be more effective in helping people understand what a valuable and excellent industry we serve. We put people back on their feet every day. You couldn't buy a car. You couldn't start a business, like you said earlier. You couldn't build a house without insurance. And we're a vital part of the economy. Any closing quick comments before we go, Julie?
No, I would just say thank you to the people who spent their time with us today. I hope it was a valuable exercise for you. And you can find me and Carl on LinkedIn and elsewhere if you have follow-up questions. I've been enormously proud to work for this industry. I'm enormously proud to work with WSRB. And again, I hope we've provided some value for the people who attended today.
Thank you so much, Julie. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks.